Hey, friends. One of the things I want to talk to you today about is the five stressors on a relationship. Now, I work with a lot of people that are in their 20s and 30s. And what I experience in all five of these stressors is that in our 20s and 30s, some of these moments happen for the very first time. And if they aren't happening for the first time, it's more than likely happening for the first time that they're married with somebody or they're going through these changes or these stressors with their significant other. And maybe even having a significantly higher level of responsibilities on their plate than when they have maybe experienced these transitions, for lack of a better word, in the past. And so I really want to acknowledge, for one, that these are moments in everybody's life that we all have to walk through, regardless of what era. But the significance for people in their 20s and 30s, the millennial generation, for those of you that may not know, is that this is going to be an era where it really starts to establish rhythm of how we show up to significant moments in our lives, chapters that are really a significant part to our stories and our legacy. So you may be wondering, what are these moments? What are these times that we all go through there are a plethora of books on, there are a plethora of resources on, and yet one thing's consistent: they all create a level of stress, or can create a level of stress in our marriage. And especially, like I said, for those of you that are in your 20s and 30s, these moments will be amplified because it may just be the first time that you're walking through this with your significant other, or just in general. And so with that, I want to provide you some tools, some resources, some guidance, some examples of what those moments are, so that really you can do certain things that maybe you haven't thought of before. That first stressor that I experience everybody going through in a relationship is marriage itself. So here we are, where especially if you come from a faith background, where marriage is this built up significant moment. And through my personal view, marriage is truly one of those significant moments that I believe God has created to be a gift that we get to share with that person that we have made a commitment to. And obviously you can anticipate that there's probably some level of expectations, maybe some hopes, some dreams, some wishes, some ideas that you want to experience with this person. Not just physically, although definitely noteworthy, but emotionally and spiritually and physically, that you really want to establish or build routine of. But as you can imagine, it doesn't just happen overnight. You see these marriages that have surpassed decades worth of longevity, and we have to realize they all started somewhere. And they didn't come out of the gates just, hitting home runs. In fact, most relationships, most marriages have been a very slow process of growth over the duration of a long amount of time. And so you can imagine, whenever I come into whenever I entered into my marriage, being one of six kids, and my wife being one of three kids. I'm one of 26 grandchildren. She's not. She doesn't have any, cousins. Just even the dynamics of how we experience family is different. No one's better, no one's worse, but of course, we both have some level of expectations about how we will experience our extended family beyond our initial core group. And so let's be honest, having conversations about expectations in our family dynamics, in our marriage, can be really, really helpful. So, talking about things like money, talking things like sex, talking about things like past wounds or hurts or pains and sufferings, talking about who in our lives that we're going to invite into this process of marriage, right? These are the things that will allow you and your partner to establish a level of peace and care for both of you as you start to navigate these nuances that marriage comes with. Because it does now share about money, and we have to talk about house, and we do have to talk about dieting, and we do, and not like we have to starve ourselves, but just like, what do we eat? What is the norm? What do we spend money on? How do we live our life? What is luxury? What is necessity? What are those things? And you know what? Here's the thing: you can't answer all these things leading up to marriage. In fact, you have to answer these things as you're in the middle of marriage. And frankly, um, answering those questions honestly and in unity in the front end will bring forth some peace on the long term, especially whenever you add a mortgage or a child or a dog or a cat. If you're a cat person, I'm not one of them, but you might be. More power to you. Um, these are the things that really have to come about and can cause a high level of stress whenever you realize the person that you woke up besides isn't Prince Charming or isn't Princess, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. These are the realities that we wake up to. And it can be a very stressful moment for a lot of couples to enter into this marriage, not just in the first couple months, but the first couple years. And so some of life's greatest challenges come in from marriage. Number two, death. Significant challenges come in with death. It goes without saying. But in my experience, both parties, for one thing's for sure, nobody grieves the same. Nobody. And so in a relationship, when one spouse, maybe it's you, maybe it's your partner, grieves a little bit more outwardly while the other one grieves inwardly, you can imagine the comparison theories and the judgments and the pain and the hurt and maybe even the shame that can very easily settle in. And this is just one example of how grief can cause hurt in a relationship, right? The loss of somebody, the loss of something is always sad. It may not be sad. It may be angry, and there may be some other emotions. And for both parties to experience the emotions that they have can, as you can imagine, cause a level of stress for both people. And in my experience, one of the greatest blessings that we can do for our partners in this season uh, is the ministry of presence, which literally involves us just sitting and being with one another and just giving the other person the permission to grieve however way they need to grieve, whether that's going on a walk or being in a room by themselves or crying on our shoulders or watching a movie or doing really whatever is needed for them in that season. And knowing that grieving is something that's done privately. And in marriage, you share that privacy. And that can be a really powerful gift. And it can also be a very hard one. And so it's no wonder whenever we look at grieving, when we look at loss, when we look at death, it can cause a significant challenge in connection with our partner. Number three, babies, birth. These new little people show up. Okay. You can ask anybody. I love babies. I love being able to hold them. I love playing with them. It's always something that has been fun for me, but I also know is not fun for everyone, and it's not fun for all spouses. And so adjusting to the new rhythms of a new little person in our home can cause, sleep deprivation to start with, a little bit of stress, anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, insecurities, right? I mean, let's be honest. There's this, out of all the things in life, having your own child, nobody really goes through a checkbox of can you or are you eligible to do this. They kind of just, the hospital says, here you go out. And they just kind of assume that you are now capable of raising a human without any training, without any type of prerequisites. And surprise, surprise, both mom and dad are finding this to be a bit chaotic because they don't know what they don't know. They think they know what they do know. And frankly, they're figuring out everything else in between. And so while I may think that a kid can eat a full grape and my wife may think that they can't, you can see how this can honestly cause a level of stress and worry for both parties. And so it's no surprise that whenever a newborn or even a second or third or fourth or fifth child are born, it can cause a little level of hiccups. Now, what do we do? Where do we go from here? Well, those are all great questions. And honestly, it just depends on the couple because every couple is different and every home is unique. And so for me to tell you that this is what you should do or this is what you have to be is kind of silly. So what I would recommend is, what do I want to cause for this person, for my partner, for this child? What do I want to call forth? What do I want to embody towards them and be with them to be that blessing, to call forth that joy that is totally possible, even in the craziness of new life. So we have marriage, we have death, we have birth, moving. One of my most frustrating, painful transitions ever is moving. Okay. I don't like it. In fact, I'm pretty certain that God did not create moving. He would not have allowed people to carry all their crap to places that they shouldn't have to be moving their crap to. In fact, I would say that in my personal opinion, I have no theology to back this up, but my personal conviction is that your crap was supposed to stay where your crap is always there and stays there. But we live in a world where we are pre-transient, which is pretty cool because we can pick up and go and move just about anywhere with anything, with anyone. Now, surprise, surprise, couples, if you're anything like me, even in our story that I've shared with you all, moving is not an easy decision. One spouse may want to go, one spouse may want to stay where they are. Or maybe one spouse wants to go there and the other wants to go somewhere else. Maybe we're moving for the sake of a job. Maybe we're moving for the sake of new opportunities that we are excited about, or family members. So we have a level of expectations that accompany this move. And yet, surprise, surprise, whenever we move somewhere, there comes a level of difficulty and trial and error in being the new kid on the block. And then how both partners relate to that new reality of being the new kid on the block, where to move, how to move, what to find, what things do matter to each partner can be extremely frustrating, almost to the point where you start finding that the other person is kind of the steamroller and just domineering and making the decisions. The other one's just kind of there for the ride. And let me tell you guys, if that's what's happening for you, please reach out, because it can be a really powerful opportunity for both of you. I see this with a lot of military folk that are in constant movement, and they really are at the mercy of their careers. But it's of no surprise that a lot of partners are exhausted of that. And that's not to knock the military. In fact, there's plenty of other there's plenty of other jobs that require the same type of movement for their careers: coaches, missionaries, and uh, corporate employees that definitely require significant moves to climb a ladder of sorts. And for that stress to then be not just on the marriage, but also on the family members, i.e., the children specifically, we can all agree that there's a level of care that's required um, in this season of transition. So, what I always tell people is, let's get ahead of this. Let's get clear on why we're moving, where we're going, what we're up to, what we're committed to. What are we going to do to best serve each and every person in this move so that we can be a united front and actually go forth in peace? And peace, by the way, doesn't just mean that there's no problems or there's no hiccups. It really just means that we're able to handle it, be united, and be intentional and be in integrity in this change together, regardless of the craziness. Okay. So moving is a stressor for any relationship. And last but not least, job change. So you can imagine lots of people in their 20s and 30s are trying to figure out what the hell are they doing with their lives? Who are they? What are they doing? And what's their life mission? And where do they live that mission out? And it's pretty typical, especially for those in 20s and 30s, to have multiple careers before the age of 30. And that's okay. Honestly, I think it's a great thing, because in full transparency, we don't know what we don't know until we get there. And so to have opportunities to try different things, if we're in agreement with that, rock on. Okay. That's not something our past generations have had access to. They just hadn't. But we really do, and that's a really powerful gift. Now, of course, it can come at a great cost. It could be very exhaustive. It could be very tiring, and it may even be lonely, because you're wondering, are we ever going to be established? Are we ever going to have the money that we want to have for our family? Are we going to have the opportunities that we really want to have, that we want to experience? And so there's a lot of questions that really go into this question of this job change reality. So whenever somebody does change, how are we preparing for this financially? Are we aware of the risks? A lot of people that I work with are entrepreneurs, and one is an entrepreneur by nature and by wiring. The other one is a more traditional employee, 9 to 5, no bad. And you can imagine both parties have different mindsets, and both have different expectations of what work looks like. And so for one to say, let's say one goes into the self-employment realm, well, last time I checked, starting your own business is no tiptoe through the tulips. No matter how good you are, no matter how talented you are, no matter how popular you are, it is a stressor of sorts. Now, it's just as true that an employee can be just as stressed out at their job too. So I don't want to minimize one over the other. I simply want to call out that a job change is a significant stressor, or can be a significant place where frustrations and maybe even expectations are being fallen short. Whenever somebody goes out into a new job and doesn't bring home the bacon like they thought they would, you can probably imagine the frustration that the other spouse, or disappointment that the other one may have when they look at the lack of results. So, one of the things I always tell people is one, have the honest conversations of what's our line in the sand. If somebody is going out into their new endeavor of starting their own business, do we have an emergency fund? That's number one. Number two, do we have money that we can live off of separate from our emergency fund, right? That we can live off of till you get paid. And then three, what's the timeline? How much runway are we going to give for this thing? We're going to give it 6 months. We're going to give it 6 days. We're going to give it 6 years. What is the timeline that we are going to use to know when you need to get back into getting a real job? Sounds kind of harsh. And yet having that conversation on the front end will feel way healthier than having it if you later, after now you've been broke and you burnt through all your cash. And now everybody's stressed out and really, really mad at each other. It's really hard to recover from that. So these are the stressors: marriage, death, birth, moving, and job change. It's also really important that, especially in these 20s and 30s, that you acknowledge that doing multiple of these is also a reality for people in our 20s and 30s. And that only just compounds the stress. So whenever I talk to couples who are newly married, they're thinking about buying a house, and they're thinking about doing a job change, I always tell them, one, it's possible. It's absolutely possible. But it's only going to be really possible if you have a clear vision for who you are, who you're standing for, what you're calling forth into the world, and being united in that. And if you don't be surprised that you will find some level of hardship, and that compounding stress will compound. And it also may be wisdom speaking to not do all of those at one time. In other words, if you're getting married, maybe rent for a first year. In fact, that's usually what I recommend. Or if you're moving, once again, just rent. Or if you're doing a job change, don't move. Or if you need to move, it's because you're doing what's wise and necessary financially or familially to your reality to then live the job that you want to experience for your family. Even for grieving, knowing that there's not major life decisions that need to be made in that moment of grief. You don't need to sell the house. You don't need to change the job, especially in that precious, fragile state that you or your partner may be in. And here's the thing, my friends, these all this I share with you is easier said than done. I can tell you this because it's really just me talking to a camera. It's me talking to you, and hearing it, while comforting, the transformation in your relationship is going to come over time. And that's what we want to do. That's what I want to do with you. Because there's so much more to these conversations than what I'm just sharing. I'm just sharing the hardships. The solutions, the belief systems, the judgments, the tears, the laughter, the pain, the opportunities that are also just as present and just as possible are what we get to experience together whenever we walk through this coaching program. Whenever you stand with each other and getting clear of what it is you're wanting to work through, and really walking you from that place of these stressors causing exhaustion, this tiredness, this stress, this uncertainty, to moving it into this place of intimacy, integrity, and intentionality. That's the gift. Walking through these stressors that are going to happen, and experiencing a level of connection with your partner that is absolutely possible in grief, in hardship, in suffering, that then allows you to experience freedom in new ways. That's why we're here. That's what I'm up to. And that's why I want you to join me. Because even if you aren't experiencing some of these right now, You probably will in your time. And I pray some of it not too soon. But I know that reality will strike. You will get a phone call one day, and unfortunately, I will too, where we will have our worlds rocked and we will have news that is beyond our control. And how we show up matters. So if you're saying to me, Joe, I'm not in that place. We're not moving. We're not having children. We're nobody's dying. Nothing bad is happening. Well, great. Kudos. That's fantastic. Let's work together. Let's actually connect. Let's make sure that when that time does come, you can stand in the place of certainty, of intimacy, of intentionality, and integrity with your partner as you're standing in that with yourself. And if you are in that place, it's not too late. You're not too far gone, because I too have been there. I know what that's like to be standing in a room with your partner, having the same stupid argument over and over again about moving, and yet you can't seem to align. You can't seem to agree. You just don't want to talk about it. You're sick and tired of bringing it up because you know where the conversations are going. You know what they believe about you. You know what you believe about them, and you're tired of it. And I'm telling you, in my experience, whenever you're in the conversation with a coach who is willing to hold a space for you to give your voice agency, to give your heart a level of openness and receptivity to other possibilities, you start seeing some changes. You start seeing transformation. The integrity, the intimacy, and the intentionality follow. And that's a blessing. So if you're in your 20s and 30s and you're going through, or you're preparing for, or you're just aware of undealt with hurt and suffering and stressors in past, whether it's marriage, death, birth, moving, or job change, this is really a conversation for you. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here. Because I care, and because I know that there are great opportunities to walk in intimacy and integrity and intentionality with one another. Thanks, friends.